Hello and welcome to episode 3 of season 3 of Free Speech, the Natural United podcast, dedicated to showcasing interesting issues that pertain to the planet and space. And today we're going to continue on our season 3 trend of talking about current events and issues that are currently going on around the world when it comes to the environment. So, as I'm sure many of you have heard, Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest man in America and also the wealthiest man in the world, founder of Amazon, has committed $10 billion to what is being called the Jeff Bezos Earth Fund. And the purpose of the Jeff Bezos Earth Fund is to combat climate change, which Jeff says is the biggest threat to our planet. Out of all the geopolitical issues that we are currently facing, he believes that climate change is the problem that needs the most time dedicated towards it. So he's donating $10 billion in order to hopefully counteract what's been going on our planet. And he received a fair bit of scrutiny. If you remember, a lot of his employees walked out of their jobs, suggesting that Amazon was terrible for the environment and that they weren't living up to their initiatives that they had set. They had initiatives set to counteract their influence in climate change, and a lot of the employees felt like they weren't really living up to the code that they were trying to set. So Bezos decided to go out and shell out $10 billion, which is the largest contribution to the issue of climate change ever made by anyone ever around the world. And so whether or not it counteracts the negatives that have obviously came as a result of Amazon as a company, I think that it's incredibly forward-thinking in that he is doing more than anyone else. Although when we think about notable people who have donated a lot of their time, energy, and resources towards climate change, here are a few that come to mind. So Jeremy Grantham is the first, and he gave 98% of his wealth, which was over $1 billion. And he is known as a very strategic investor, rather than allowing his investments to be solely based on the financial productivity of a company. He kind of looked into the environmental and social impact of the companies that he was investing in. And so what I mean by this is that he was investing in companies that he thought were improving the world, and improving the world environmentally at that. And so Bezos is kind of taking after him with his $10 billion of donations. He has yet to decide exactly how he's going to contribute those resources, but he has set aside $10 billion. And then a second group of environmentalist philanthropists that we can look at is the Resnick family. They are the owners of Waterfall company, and they pledged $750 million for sustainability research at Caltech, which I think is a really interesting way to go about environmental conservation, is handing educational institutions the opportunity to gather more resources, look at more data, and really have more of a combative effort towards what I also believe is probably the most damaging potential human problem that we're going to have to deal with in our generation. And then in Europe, there is Swiss entrepreneur, and I might butcher this name, Hans-Jörg Weiss. He donated $1 billion with the goal of conserving 30% of Earth by 2030 using national parks and conservatories. This would be another really interesting avenue for Bezos to take. If he were to create a substantial amount of land that was available to all people, as well as allowing natural processes to continue without humans getting in the way, I think that this could be super interesting. 30% of Earth being saved would be a fantastic directive, although we are going to have to accomplish a lot in the meantime in order for that to be a reality. And then lastly, there is Tom Steyer. He is most famous for running for president this year as a Democrat, but he also has pledged half of his fortune to combat climate change because he believes it is the greatest geopolitical problem of our time, and to be honest with you, I have to agree with him. So Bezos, clearly not the only wealthy entrepreneur who has tried to be a climate philanthropist, but at $10 billion, he right now is the most substantial. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have a whole plethora of ideas of how they want to bring about climate change activism, but beyond that, this is a massive step in the right direction, I think, for Jeff Bezos, and his two initiatives are this. One, he wants to amplify the known ways that we have already discovered to prevent climate change. And then beyond that, he wants to explore as many new ways as possible to fight the devastating effects that climate change have clearly caused around the world. And so Amazon, his company, has also made a lot of initiatives, and this is something that he felt would allow him to have a clean conscience when it came to what effect Amazon is having on the world. So they have committed to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2040. So Bezos is the largest donor to climate change in the world, but he's also the owner of a nearly $1 trillion corporation that has caused a massive amount of the issues that we relate to climate change. When you think about ordering a product and have it showing up the next day, maybe it comes from across the country, you can imagine the carbon footprint that would occur to get one product, fly it all the way across the country so it's at your doorstep the next day. So I think we're really going to have to think about some innovative solutions if we want to combat climate change and all of the emissions that come from the products that we buy on that website. If you think about the sheer amount of earth material that is traded back and forth on Amazon, it is astonishing. It is beyond impressive that someone was able to build a platform that large, but I think let's say Amazon, years down the road, is the most impressive corporation, the largest organization, the company that's selling the most physical material to people. If they were a company that was capable of creating more sustainable practices around the world, I think that that would be a very good thing. Now, with the amount that Bezos has pledged, he would be capable of creating or possibly replicating the largest wind farm, which is London Array, and also building 5 of the largest solar farms in the United States. That's the Gemini solar farm. So it's very clear to me that he can make a very substantial impact even with only 8% of his net worth. Now, a lot of people are criticizing Bezos for not giving enough of his income, but as I have said earlier, this is the largest single donation from an individual that we have seen towards climate action, and I think that is admirable in itself. So he's yet to announce his plans of how he intends to spend the money, but renewable energy, as you have to remember, has really only been feasible both scientifically and commercially for about the past 30 years. It got going in the 90s at a large scale. And so you have to realize a lot of what's going on is relatively new. These are new ideas in the atmosphere. 100 years ago, there were very few people who had an intention to use renewable energy. The first ideation of it, the first few theories around it came in the early 1900s. And so this is something that is very new, but I think looking forward into the future, I think that there is a lot of room for us to figure out how we can live sustainably. That way, thousands of years from now, we aren't run out of all the resources that we're going to need to survive. So, in summation, I do think that Jeff's move to donate this money could be a great first step for Earth to see what would happen if someone who has a very substantial amount of resources dedicates their time and energy to discovering how we can live more sustainably. I know Amazon has had its qualms with the way they treat their employees, with the way they treat the environment, but I think that this is an amazing first move in the direction of figuring out how we can live sustainably as a species. Thank you guys all so much for your time. If you have anything that you would like for us to discuss on future episodes of this podcast, please let me know in the comments, whether it be on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn. We're more than happy to get the conversation going about the environment. But thank you, Jeff Bezos, for the Jeff Bezos Earth Fund. We'll see what he ends up actually spending his money on. I know I'm very curious. But we'll see the long-term effect of what someone who's worth over $100 billion can do when they put their money to work. Thank you.